Our service doesn't end after we leave the military. The mission changes, but we still find the need to be of service. What's yours? Listen in as we talk to our guests about their military careers and life after the uniform in their second service. This podcast is sponsored by Fortis et Fidelis, a brand dedicated to honoring the brave and faithful. Make sure to check out fortis-fidelis.com and support the podcast by subscribing to the show and leaving us a 5-star review on all the podcast platforms. Now, let's get to the show. What's going on, everyone? Raiden here, and we just want to let you all know that for the second year in a row, the Brave and Faithful podcast has been nominated by the Veteran Podcast Awards as one of the top best overall podcasts and the best Navy-hosted podcasts. Make sure you all go to veteranpodcastawards.com/vote and vote for our podcast for the best overall and the best Navy-hosted podcast. Voting begins August 8th and ends September 18th. So again, head over to veteranpodcastawards.com/vote and vote for the Brave and Faithful podcast for the best overall and the best Navy-hosted podcast. Thank you all for your support. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Brave and Faithful podcast. Today I have a Air Force veteran. He's also an author and a speaker, Jeff Clark. What's going on, Jeff? How you doing?
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. And again, thanks for taking the time here.
Yeah, sure.
I mentioned you were the Air Force. Can you just share with our audience a little bit about your service, your time in, and when how long you served for?
Yeah, so served for 12 years in the Air Force. I was medically retired in 2017. I was in medical logistics. For those who don't know, it's basically medical supply. I did a lot of special duties. I did a couple of joint assignments down in San Antonio. So got some joint experience, really liked working with the Army. I kind of found a second home with them and felt very welcome with them. So joint assignments were really cool. Like I said, I did 12 years. I was medically retired because broke my back, messed it up, pushing around cargo, lifting, and then I messed up my shoulder. So with those things combined, it was just hard to kind of bounce back from. So they ended up medically retiring me. And then when I medically retired, I took about 8 months off, and then I went back and I worked for the government again in a different capacity, but still in a support role, supporting the mission. So yeah, 12 years Air Force, loved every minute of it. I wish I could have stayed longer, but just wasn't in the cards.
So 12 years. I mean, it seemed like obviously you were trying to make it a career, right? Until you got medically retired. What was kind of like? How was the transition from leaving the military and then going back into the civilian sector?
So mine was maybe a little different than other people. I did not choose to leave. I didn't choose to transition out. And since it kind of forced my hand, they did a medical board on me, like a lot of other people have been through. And, I was I was facing, a medical separation or medical retirement. But, I really had to, in the Air Force, they give you an opportunity to get a lawyer. You can get a military lawyer. You can hire one from downtown. And I got a military lawyer, and I went to go meet with him. And he was like, man, we got this in the bag. They haven't looked at several things that they're basically trying to boot you for. And, I think we have a really strong case. He's like, so we went over things, and he kind of got me prepared to what, because you actually go to court. I mean, you go to a military court and stand there and, just like you see on TV and all that. And we were ready to go, man. And I went home, showed up the next day, 30 minutes early, like he told me to. And I walked into his office, and he's like, cool, man, I'm glad you're here. Let's sign some papers and I'll get you out of here. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, man, I took this in front of the judge, man. He looked at it for 1 second and said, "Nah, I'm not wasting my time on this.
Oh,
There's all
wow.
kinds of stuff this guy's busted up for that they haven't even tried to look at." So he signed retirement papers and said, "Yeah, let this guy go." So, yeah, mine was a little different than maybe some other people, but probably still similar to others. But yeah, I didn't have that option. I was kind of faced with it. So like that last year and a half I was in was very stressful because, you know, if any of you listening have been through a med board, you know, but for those of you who haven't, it's very stressful. They have a lot of
Yeah.
demands of you, and you do a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of what ifs, and there's no timetable. It just kind of happens when it happens, you know, and then when you finally get to the resolution, you know, they only give you like 45 days to get out. I mean, it's like, hey, okay, now you got your orders, get out. So for me, the transition was quick. I kind of saw it coming because I kind of knew from the injuries, but when it really happened, you know, I was already back in my hometown. I got orders here, and we were already living. And had a living situation figured out, so I didn't have to move or pick up my house or anything like that. I just came right back home, and I went to work for a local company selling beer and just kind of paying the bills while I was waiting on the right government job to open up on the base to get back into. So I did that for like 5 months of the out of the 8 that I was out of uniform. And,
All right.
you know, that's kind of what I went back and did. The transition for me really didn't happen until a couple years later. That's when it really happened to me, when I was used to being a civilian and I was being around the military, and that all that camaraderie and things like that. You're seeing it firsthand, but you're not getting to be a part of it. You know, kind of. That's when the transition really hit me.
So were you at, knowing you were going to court and kind of like it was going to go either one way or the other, right? Were you kind of, maybe preparing yourself like, hey, once this does happen, like this is what I'm gonna. Did you have any plans laid out or anything like that, or is it like what you said, like a couple years later where you're kind of fully transitioned?
So I knew, like, you know, you're going to court for at least a month or two, and my date kept getting pushed back. They kept pushing back my case. Once it was at that level, it's out of, you know, local hands. Nobody locally can really help you. They're just kind of like, hey, we're just waiting on them to take your case.
Right.
Um, and so it just kept getting pushed back. So in a kind of a blessing in disguise, it kept getting pushed back, and more people found out that I was going to have to leave. And more people were reaching out to me like, hey, you know, hit me up when you leave. You know, oh, there might be some government jobs opening up that we'll consider you for. We want you to apply. So that kind of bought me some time. And next thing I knew, you know, when it did actually happen, there were several jobs that were open that I applied for, but they had that, well, right when I got out, um, Trump got elected, and then he did that government hiring freeze. So I was kind of in limbo with a certain job. You know, after I had sold beer for a couple of months and waiting for that job to open up, he did the hiring freeze after he got elected, and then I kind of got hung up in that a little bit for like 3 or 4 weeks, so that delayed my start date. But I eventually got in there, and yeah, like I said, it wasn't until a couple years later when I really started interacting with more veterans and finding out what the transition was really like for other people that it really kind of hit me. And I was like, man, I was blessed. I was really, really blessed because mine could have been a whole lot more difficult transition wise, and it wasn't. So, like I said, I was really blessed that it was easier than it could have been.
Yeah, because you always hear about, yeah, like the stories of, the difficulties, transitioning military members have,
Yeah.
when they're retiring or separating from the military. Did you have any, some sort of like that experience? Did you go through any of that, or like what was some of the worst moments you had, you know, knowing that you were being basically medically retired and, this was what you wanted to do, but you were told no, like what was those moments like?
So really, it was really a couple years later when I realized um, how much I missed it. And then that's when those things started kicking in. So I immediately went back to work and I went to a job, and, I was around the military. So I never really like mentally transitioned away from the military because I wasn't really away from it very long. So it was kind of a process of, okay, I'm a civilian. I'm treated a little differently. It's not the same anymore. And it took a little while to get used to that. But again, I was around it. So it wasn't as bad. What really hit me was when my body kind of started catching up to myself. And I realized, that high of kind of coming off of the transition and getting, used to a new life and all that. When I came off of that high a couple years later, that's when it really hit me, because I was like, oh, now my body's telling me I can't do things that I used to be able to do. And that was a game changer. And that's when the physical and the mental started kind of coming in crashing down. And I had to go get help, because that's what I wasn't ready for.
So now, kind of just fast forward, you mentioned when you first got out, you were working for a beer company, and then now you got a job as, basically back with the government, right?
Yep.
So how did you, was that something you were always looking for, or like, how did you come across that?
Well, honestly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was getting out. I knew that I wanted to support my wife going to school, so I really didn't care what I did. I was just concerned with that next phase, and it was really important to me that she went to school. Yeah. But I on my way out the door, there were jobs opening up that people were showing interest in me in the government and in the civilian sector. The timing didn't hit quite right that summer when I got out and I was eligible and I had my 214 in my hand and all that. So I kind of missed the boat on a few opportunities and had to wait. But when the local beer salesman, the brand representative job came open, that's when I was like, oh, let me do this and let me be local for a little while and let me pay some bills and wait for that right opportunity to open up, because I really wanted to go back to work for the government for the benefits and for the stability. And it's one of the bigger employers here in my hometown. So I kind of waited and had the patience, and I really relied on a lot of my friends who were already working for the government, and they were telling me tips and tricks and resume, examples and all that. And I really leaned on a lot of my, brothers and sisters in arms and veterans, because they're the ones who helped me get a job. So I kind of knew some opportunities were coming up. I just kind of kept my eyes open, and I was patient.
So, so you got this job as, as a government employee. And now you've, several years later, you have the podcast, right? Courses of Action podcasts. Mm-hmm. You have a book that just came out. How did you go about, creating basically the podcast, and then what made you write the book that's currently out now?
So I wrote the book. I had it written when I was on active duty. I had kind of a shell of an idea, and I said, one day I want to do this. And even if it was just something that I wrote and my kids eventually saw, and, they were just kind of, oh my God, my dad wrote a book. Like, it was something that it was for them mainly. But when I became a government civilian, I got promoted into a government civilian leadership position. I was making decisions over both civilian and military operations. And I did a lot of great work, but I did a lot of great work because there's a lot of great folks that worked under me that did awesome work and make me look good. So, the kudos are to them. But I was recognized as the 2019 Air Force Civilian Supervisor of the Year. Really, really big award, big deal. And it really humbled me and made me go, okay, a lot of people did a lot of really good work. And I got to take a lot of credit of it because of my position. And I got that recognition, but they really deserved, probably 75 to 90% of it because of, if they didn't do what they did, I would have been fired. That's just the bottom line. And so I really took that as a sign of I could do more. So I needed to dedicate myself to finishing that book and kind of putting my leadership, ideas and concepts and theories and tips and tricks on paper. So I went back to the book and I said, I'm going to do it now. I really am. And I sat down and I just kind of started hammering it out. And I had like 55,000 words written, I think. And I canned like 30,000 words of it. I just said, this is not the route I was wanting to go. It kind of felt forced. And I just kind of sat there and tried to develop a little bit more. And I took a break and I went back to it a bunch of times. And it wasn't until Tactical 16 came along and Chris Schaefer is the CEO. He's a former Green Beret. And he came to me and said, man, I heard about your book. Let's go have a beer. And I was in Colorado at the time. And we went and had a beer and I told him about it. And he loved the idea and told me to send it to him whenever I got in a position that I was ready to, send it out to a publisher. And he wanted to review it. And sent him the first couple of chapters, I think, that Christmas. And he replied back with a contract and said, I love it. Finish it and let's go. So I did the podcast to answer the second part of your question. I did the podcast because I really felt like during COVID, it's probably a cliche answer, but during COVID, I felt like it was really hard to meet people because we were locked down. So I did the podcast as another way to have intimate discussions with people and to really learn about other people and make relationships. Because I saw a lot of people on LinkedIn and social media that were reaching out and making relationships, but they were just doing it on message threads and posts and all that. And I said, I really want something where I can look at people in the eyes and talk to them face to face, like kind of like what we're doing now, and make those relationships. And I said, so I really want to learn about people. And that's why I finally one day woke up and said, I'm doing it. Today, I'm starting a podcast. And then I did it.
Yeah. So, and again, for the audience, those listening in, the book is Here Are These Truths, the ultimate guide to building your leadership algorithm. Jeff, you said you wrote this while you were still in active duty. Was this something that you kind of just like over time, you were just writing portions of it, knowing that it was going to be a book, or it was just something from the experience you gained and you just wanted to write things down?
It really kind of started off as like a more organized and professional like journal of my thoughts.
Yeah.
So that one day I could write a book on it, or I at least have things and I wouldn't have to try to remember everything.
Right.
And it kind of started off as that. And then, like I said, once I was kind of in a position where I had a lot of influence and a lot of decision making, and I kind of realized how important really good leadership really was, because I saw some bad leadership and I saw some really good leadership, and it really just motivated me. And that's when I just said, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to really try to do a product that I'm proud of. Now, is anybody going to buy it? I have no idea. But, my point was to do something that I could share with people and that they could learn from. And that's really was kind of the point of it.
Jeff, what would you say has been kind of like the most rewarding moment you've had or experienced since you started your own podcast, Courses of Action, and since you wrote the book, Here Are These Truths?
I think for the book, it was when people have emailed me or reached out to me and quoted something that I said in there. It's awesome, but it's also humbling at the same time, because, the point I started out to do is to give something that people would enjoy, and it would influence their lives. It would make them better. They would learn something from it. And in turn, I can learn something from them. But when they reach out to me and they quote something, I'm like, dude, that hit me so hard. Like, that's such an awesome quote. You don't remember. It's 65,000 words. I don't remember everything I wrote in there.
Right.
I mean, so when somebody says something, I'm like, well, what page was that on? I go back and reference it and just, man, I'm glad you liked that, man, because that's why I did it. So why I did it was to help people out and to share my thoughts and see where people could go. And that's the best part about writing the book, is just knowing that it resonates with people. That's probably the best. I'm not looking for TV interviews or to get rich. It's just knowing that I had a further impact on other people's lives. And Kind of the same thing with the podcast. I think the biggest, most rewarding thing on that is just meeting new people and getting the support of people, that kind of unconditional support. Like, yeah, man, I love it. Keep doing it, and then you get to reciprocate that with other people. A lot of my guests have written books. I've bought those books. I've shared them with other people. So it's just, you're building that community and that network of people. So you can sit there and say, hey man, have you heard about this? Like, you really need to check out the, Fortis et Fidelis, the Brave and the Faithful podcast, man, because those guys rock. And then, you're going to do the same for me and for other people. And it's just kind of a unconditional way of supporting each other. And I think that's maybe the best part about it is knowing that you're part of that community and that you're growing together with people.
Yeah, and speaking of supporting one another, just for our audience out there, Jeff and our podcasts are nominated at the second annual Veteran Podcast Awards.
Yep.
Make sure you guys go to the website. We'll share the link on the show notes here, but make sure you guys vote for Jeff for the best Air Force hosted podcast and myself as the best Navy hosted podcast.
Heck yeah, man. I vote every day. I've been voting for you and me every day.
Yeah.
I have my family doing it. I'm telling everybody, go vote for this podcast, and this podcast. Make sure you do it every single day.
Awesome. I appreciate that, brother.
Want to support an active duty owned brand? Head over to fortis-fidelis.com. Again, that's fortis-fidelis.com, and help us in honoring the brave and faithful service of our nation's defenders. All proceeds will help us create and provide memorial coins to the families of our fallen service members. Again, that's fortis-fidelis.com, and help Fortis et Fidelis in honoring the brave and faithful.
What's going on, everyone? Raiden here, and we just want to let you all know that for the second year in a row, the Brave and Faithful podcast has been nominated by the Veteran Podcast Awards as one of the top best overall podcasts, the best Navy hosted podcasts. Make sure you all go to veteranpodcastawards.com/vote and vote for our podcast for the best overall and the best Navy hosted podcast. Voting begins August 8th and ends September 18th. So again, head over to veteranpodcastawards.com/vote and vote for the Brave and Faithful podcast for the best overall and the best Navy hosted podcast. Thank you all for your support. So Jeff, you've done the podcast, you've written your own book. What advice would you give to our audience that are listening in, that maybe one day want to start their own podcast, or maybe want to, write their own book? What are some actionable steps that you can kind of give to those people right now?
Well, for a podcast, I would say the biggest thing I learned was to really do some research on what other people have done and go listen to some similar podcasts of what maybe you're wanting to do, and take a look at their branding, take a look at their message, and take a look at their format, their length, their frequency, and all that stuff, and then come up with an idea for yourself, because podcasts tend to be pretty specific. They have kind of a targeted audience, and the last thing you want to do is to try to cast this wide net and try to get every person in the world to listen to your podcast, because you're going to be so general and so broad that you're going to have a hard time capturing an audience. The second thing I would say is be okay with having slow results, because you want to build into something big. You don't want to try to come out big out the gate necessarily. You might struggle with that, and that will lead to disappointing results. And disappointing results oftentimes is what kills momentum, and it kills people doing things. If I were to have quit after my first 5 episodes, because of the viewership that I got immediately after that, I would have, it would have been an easy loss because I would have just given up. But instead, I kept saying, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to improve this. I'm going to improve that. Here's what I want to do in the next 6 months, in the next 2 years. Here's some guests I want to invite. I want to kind of kick it up a notch. And it's kind of pressing forward and just staying the course. Don't do your research, but don't get intimidated and don't get disappointed by where you're at. Because now one of my first five episodes, 6 episodes, one of those is like one of my best episodes ever. So,
oh, wow. People are like listening back to it.
Exactly. So it wasn't about that in a moment. I mean, it didn't do very good for like 6 months. And then as I published more episodes and I did some cross promoting and I did a little bit more pushing it out there, and then people caught on, and then people started going back and looking at, back episodes. That's when things kind of started catching on. And that's really what you have to do, is you have to just kind of wait and stay the course and just keep being persistent. And, like they say, you need just keep showing up, and it'll come. The results will come if you're doing it right and you're putting effort into it and you're putting passion into it. The results will come. And it's not quite the same as writing a book. Writing a book's a little different, man. Like, I think you really have to sit down and be dedicated to writing, because, if you look at how much like a regular paper in school might be 2,000 or 3,000 words, and that's like 10, 15 pages long. You're like, man, that's a long paper. Well, think about how much a 200-page book, how many words is that? We're in the 60s and 70,000s, so you've really got to put some effort into it, because, and they say the first 50 pages are the most important, because if somebody can read after the first 50 pages, you've captured them. So on the same token as a podcast, if you're going to write a book, do your research. Read some books that are in your genre that you're targeting. Talk to other people. Reach out to guys like me who have already wrote a book and say, hey, can I bend your ear for half an hour? And I've done it to several veterans, since I've published. I've sat down with them like this on Zoom or whatever and said, man, what do you need to know? What can I help you with? What can I tell you? And go from there, because it's a daunting process, but it doesn't have to be, a solo daunting process. There's plenty of people out there to help you.
What are some things that you've taken away from the service that's kind of helped you with, starting your own podcast and being an author, publishing your own book?
Ooh, man, that's a good question. I would say patience. It's really taught me patience. It's really taught me expectation management, which was something that
that's good.
In the military, expectation management was a big thing.
Right.
Attention to detail. Of course, we know that in the military, attention to detail is a huge thing. But showing up is probably maybe the biggest thing. I mentioned it a little bit ago. Showing up every day, crisp uniform, looking good, boots polished. They don't polish their boots anymore, but being presentable and saying I'm here to work. And I think that's what got me through the book. That's what really got me through it, because I kept throwing things out and saying it wasn't good enough, and I kept going back to it, but I kept going back. And that was the thing. I kept showing up. I kept working. And that work ethic was really kind of what got me through. And it's what gets me through the podcast now, because there's just days, as I'm sure there's just days I don't want to record. I don't want to edit. I don't want to advertise. It's just, it's work, man. And when you work all day and then you come home and you got to do it again, but that can't shine through in the microphone, or on video. You really got to show up and be pumped up and be ready to go, because that's what people are tuning in to listen to you when you give them a good product. So you got to show up.
Definitely. I think that's the most important thing, right? It's just obviously doing the work, but doing the work consistently is what matters.
Yeah, consistent work will equal consistent results.
Definitely. So Jeff, before we go to the second segment of our podcast here, if there's one thing or maybe a couple things you want our listeners to take away from this episode, what would those be?
Oh man. I think the biggest thing, and this is maybe the biggest thing that's been for me, is don't ever be afraid to reach out to a fellow veteran and ask them for help. Because what I found, and I found this the hard way, was that people are more willing to help than you would believe they would be. You would think that in a very crowded and kind of saturated podcast market, especially with veterans, that people will be kind of competing and fighting for, views and listens. And I've found, this is me personally, I found that to be the exact opposite. I've witnessed way more people willing to help than I have people who kind of gave me the cold shoulder. I have had people that have given me the cold shoulder, but for the most part, a lot of people are like, yeah, man, this is what I use and this is what I have. And I just went to lunch actually the other day with Dustin Kelly from the DTD podcast, and me and him had a beer, and he was telling me, man, I use this and I use this and this is what I do for this and all that. And he had, no reason to do that other than he was just being helpful. Right. And I think that's maybe the biggest thing that I would say. And whether you're doing a podcast or a book, or you're writing your resume, or you're looking for help in the job market, like, don't be afraid to reach out to another veteran and be like, hey man, I'd really like to come work for your company or a similar company. Like, what can you tell me? I'm not looking for a job or a handout, but what can you tell me about doing my resume? Or would you mind doing some interview tips with me or whatever? Just don't be afraid to reach out for help, because there's a lot of people out there willing to help, and you'd be surprised how big that amount really is.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like, obviously that's the most important thing, right? It's just asking for help. I think sometimes, I mentioned this in another episode before, sometimes our pride sometimes gets in the way of us not doing that. And
oh, absolutely. For help. Yeah, I know mine did. Mine absolutely got in the way, because I thought I was competing against everybody else for a job, for a podcast, for a book, all that. And I was wrong. Yeah, you're competing technically, but, you're only competing against yourself at that point in time. There's way more people out there that are like, yeah, man, I'm down to help. What do you need me to do?
Definitely. So, Jeff, going into the second segment of our podcast here. So this is what I call the Fast Five. These are the same 5 questions asked all my guests. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so first question here. What's one hobby you enjoy?
What's one hobby I enjoy? I really enjoy archery. I have not done it as much. I had surgery on my shoulder back in 2018. And for like the first year and a half after that, I really couldn't lift a whole lot with my arm. I was doing a lot of rehabilitation and kind of learning how to reuse that arm and that hand again. But I used it as kind of a crutch afterward, and I was kind of scared. I was really worried I was going to damage it again, and I didn't want to go through another surgery and all that rehab and physical therapy. But recently I've started picking it up, and I'm going to do the Total Archery Challenge next year, and I'm really getting back into it. So that's the one hobby that I miss, and that I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of.
What is the that challenge you mentioned, Total Archery?
So the Total Archery Challenge is basically this organization. I think Black Rifle Coffee actually funds and supports it now. They didn't used to, but they do now. And they go out and they pick different locations in the mountains. Basically, most of them are at old ski resorts during the off season when there's no snow. And they put out targets in different parts of the ski resort, and you basically walk it like you do a golf course. And it's just something, it's a different dynamic to shooting in your backyard. Like, I shoot my bow in my backyard here at 20 yards. I got a little square target. It sits on the ground. It's pretty vanilla. But when you go to this, you might be standing on the edge of a peak with a 50-yard shot, 25 yards downhill. You know what I mean? Or you might be shooting uphill, or you might have to shoot in between some trees. And it's really turned into a big event where especially a lot of veterans come out, and vendors come out. You go to this, total archery challenge and you basically play, 3 days of golf, but with your bow and arrow shooting at targets. And it's just kind of a fun event. And you can keep score, but the point of it is not to win. They don't necessarily award a winner, I don't think. And it's just kind of a good time.
Sounds interesting, man. Sounds awesome. I've never tried archery before, but
you should.
Check
You
it
should.
out.
It's good. It's good therapy. Kind of teaches you patience and consistency, and because you're not going to master it immediately, there's a lot of things you got to work on for. You got to build up your strength, and it's, to me, it's a lot like shooting a rifle. You got to work at it and get better at it. You don't become a marksman overnight.
Definitely. So, Jeff, second question here: if you had to choose one person to hang out with for one day, who would it be and why?
Oh man, one person. It can be in any genre,
anybody, dead or living.
I would probably pick my grandpa, and I would pick man, it'd be tough to choose. Honestly, I'm going to say both my grandparents, my grandfathers. One of them I never met. He was in World War II, and he died before I was even born. I'd love to sit down with him for a day and just talk war stories and just be able to see what his experience was versus what mine was and how the military has changed. He was in the Army Air Corps, and now that I'm in the Air Force, I traced his lineage through his Air Force, through his career, all the way back to basically where his squadron started and what it's become today. And I think it'd be really cool to sit down and talk to him. My grandpa on my dad's side, though, I'd really like to sit down with because, I think I'm a lot like him. He died when I was only, I think, 11. So it'd be cool to sit down with him today and just kind of get to see who he is and who I am compared to what we knew. He knew me when I was 11. I think I knew him when he was 70. So it'd be cool to chat it up now and just kind of get those life stories and experience and be able to talk to him like a man.
So your grandfather and your mom's side served in World War II in the Army Air Corps, and then your grandfather and dad's side.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Next question, Jeff. Recommend a book for our audience to read.
Ooh, dang. I'll do this. I'll do a fiction and a nonfiction. For fiction, I would say if you like kind of spy political thrillers, The Body Man by Eric Bishop. Shout out to Eric Bishop.
I just had him. I had him as a guest.
Man, I love Eric. Man, me and him are going to BoucherCon here in a couple weeks up in Minnesota. We're going to be talking thriller books, spy books, and all that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. But he's got The Body Man's a great book if you haven't read it yet and you really like military thrillers and spy thrillers and political thrillers and all that. The Body Man's a good one. And then of course he has his next one coming up. It won't release until next year, but he let me read it, early review, and it's excellent. It's this excellent follow-up. Might be even better than The Body Man, in my opinion. But yeah. And then for nonfiction, man, I think a really cool book that I like in nonfiction was by Chris Strom. He's a former Marine in New York Police Department intelligence officer, and it's called Brooklyn to Baghdad. And if you haven't had Chris on your podcast as a guest, you need to, man. He's an awesome guy. Did 30 or 40 years or something like that in the New York Police Department in intelligence. He was there driving down the street on 9/11. He eventually deployed with a special group that the U.S. Built of former special operators and intelligence guys over to Iraq, I think. And he did a lot of really cool stuff trying to find IEDs and interrogating terrorists and all that. So his book is really awesome. It's called Brooklyn to Baghdad by Chris Strom.
Brooklyn to Baghdad. I'll check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to have him on. Reach out to him. Tell him I sent you to come link up with him because he's a cool dude.
All right, we'll do. Jeff, next question. What's your favorite quote and why?
Oh, um, I mean, I got a lot of favorite quotes, but I think the one that hit me the hardest was one that I actually said, and I said it to someone, and I didn't know what I was saying at the time, and it kind of stopped them. I was on a podcast kind of like this, but I was with three other ladies, and they were kind of doing like a random like firing round, and they were all just firing questions at me, and I was just answering, and I said this off the cuff, and I didn't realize at the time how heavy it was, but they all kind of fell silent when I said it. And I said, as a leader, you should never let we be a hollow word. And they just kind of stopped and were like, wow, that's huge. And I was like, what did I say again? And they're like, don't let we be a hollow word. And I was like, yeah, like when you're a leader and you say we, but you really don't mean we, and the people that are following you know that we really means you or us,
Yeah.
doesn't mean we. It's a hollow word. It has no meaning at that point in time. So you throw it around and it means absolutely nothing. So as a leader, your words mean everything. So when you say we, it no joke has to mean we. So I said, don't let we be a hollow word. And it's my favorite. I'd say it's my favorite quote simply because of what it did when I said it for other people and how it kind of hit them hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I mean, you hear that, like throughout your time, like maybe not even in the military as well too. Like, leaders just say we.
Oh yeah, we got to do this. We got to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to go do this together. And certain people don't show up, or they didn't really mean we. They just said it in the context of we,
Right.
and it meant nothing. It was a hollow word. So when you say we, it no joke has to mean we. Don't ask people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, because your credibility will get thrown out the door.
That's a great point. All right, Jeff. So final question here. What do you see yourself in 5 years or even 10 years from now?
Oh, 5 years from now, I would really like to have another book under my belt. I really want to get into the fiction genre and write some military and kind of spy thrillers. That's kind of a dream of mine I've had for a long time, ever since I was a kid, and I wrote my own comics and kind of had my own imagination. We didn't have a lot of money when I was younger, so I didn't have like a lot of toys. I had to use my imagination. So I built stuff out of cardboard. I played outside a lot, and I just had a really big imagination. And that's something I really want to get back to as an adult, kind of doing some of those things. So I really want to have another book under my belt, preferably some kind of military or spy thriller in 5 years. And 10 years, man, I'd like to be retired sitting on the beach drinking a margarita or something. But I don't know. 10 years from now, I'll be almost 50. My kids will be grown and gone. So I think 10 years from now, I'd like to be at a point where, I'm taking some vacations, I'm relaxing, and I'm really enjoying the labors of life.
Enjoying the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
All right. So, Jeff, again, I appreciate you for your time and sharing your story. And again, for our audience out there, make sure you guys go check out the podcast, Courses of Action. Make sure you guys go grab a copy of Jeff Clark's book, Hear These Truths, on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere you can find books. So just
go to your local bookstore and tell them to order it for you too, and support local.
Awesome, man. And one final thing, Jeff, before we go, where can our audience follow you? Where can they support you?
So you can go to the website, jeffclarkofficial.com. You can see all my information there. You can, go to the store and get an autographed copy of the book. You can pick up a t-shirt, a coffee mug. You can check out the podcast from there. You can follow me on social media. All my handles are at official JS Clark. So you can get those from the website as well. But yeah, jeffclarkofficial.com, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Of course, I'm on YouTube as well. You can check out all the episodes on YouTube and some of the stuff I've been up to.
Awesome, Jeff. And again, appreciate it for your time.
Well, I appreciate you, man.
Make sure you guys grab the book. Go check out the podcast. And Jeff, I'll talk to you soon, brother. Take care.
Yep. Thanks, man.
All right.
Hey everyone, Raiden here. I just want to thank you for listening to our podcast. And make sure you guys go check out our website, fortis-fidelis.com.